Okay, now let's go ahead and start with the installation of the pyramid trigger. First and foremost, always want to be aware of safety. Whenever I work on guns, I never have any ammunition in the same room. No magazines even, and no loaded magazines, because one of the things you got to remember is that the gun is a very ergonomic device. It's designed to be shot, and it's designed to be held and designed to make loading easy. So in this maintenance mode, assembly, disassembly mode, cleaning mode, we always want to keep the ammunition separated, not on the same table, certainly away from you. You always want to make sure you work with an unloaded gun. So the first step we're always going to do is pick the gun up, inspect it, make sure the magazine is dropped, pull back the slide, verify that there are no rounds inside the chamber, drop the slide, and pull the trigger in a safe direction. Okay, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, loaded or not, just a good habit. Okay, that being said, now we're going to go ahead and go through the standard disassembly to install the pyramid trigger. Now I've got it sitting out here. This is basically how it's going to come to you pre-assembled. And basically it's pre-adjusted as well, which means you can drop it in just the way it is, and more than likely it's going to work really well for you. The screws that we use, the Allen screws that we use, do have Loctite on them, so they're not going to come out easily. You have to heat those up with either a heat gun or a lighter to get some heat onto this and to loosen that Loctite to be able to turn those, okay? So keep that in mind, it's very important. But try it first, just the way you get it from the factory. Okay, the standard disassembly procedure for a Glock. Hold the gun in this direction, okay? Kind of hard for some people to grasp sometimes. And I'm going to pull down on the slide lock lever, or also known as the takedown lever, on both sides. So pull down. As I pull down on both sides, keep it pulled down and just let the slide go forward. Now be aware that the slide will want to roll off at that point. So don't just let it slide away, because if it falls down and hits its nose on your floor, you can ding, bend, or crack this piece, and then basically the slide is worthless. So guys have done it. So that's important to keep in mind. So remember now, what we do is we give you a couple of different things here, and one of the items that we do change for the pyramid trigger is the safety plunger itself. So the steel factory plunger has a flat head and kind of square sides to it. We have a titanium safety plunger that is coated, and it has a different shape to it. Let me show it to you real quick just so you can kind of get a visual. It's a little bit more round, and because the edges are round like that, it provides a little bit better, I guess the word would be movement over the bird's eye, the trigger bar. Keeping in mind that the trigger bar right here will intersect with this safety plunger every time you pull the trigger. So as you pull the trigger, it rolls back over top of that safety plunger. The safety plunger gets pushed out of the way, which allows the striker to move forward, or the firing pin to move forward. So by coating this in titanium nitrate, and by rounding those edges a little bit, we get a little less friction, and we get a little better trigger pull, and hence better accuracy, better speeds, just like that. Pretty simple. So we'll go ahead and install that first. It's a relatively simple part to install, but certainly something you want to do. Now also that comes with this guy is a small spring. And this spring is going to be a reduced power spring. And this reduced power spring will give you less friction, again, as you pull the trigger back, that spring pushing up there ever so slightly, just a little less friction, a little lighter trigger pull, okay? So now let's go ahead and take this guy apart. The methodology to take this apart is pretty simple, and you can do this with a ballpoint pen, really. But if you notice on the back here, there's on the back of the slide, there's a striker lug that's standing down here. So we want to go ahead and pick that guy up, okay? And now it won't go back forward unless I were to push the actual safety plunger. You see how it moved forward? So the striker's actually moving forward. That's in a fired position. So I'll do that one more time so you can get a better light. So I'll go pick this guy up, and if I push the plunger down, the striker moves forward. In fact, you can actually hear it click on the bottom of the slide. Just that little tink noise. That's the striker moving in the metal hitting metal. So in order to gain access to this safety plunger, what I need to do is pull the striker back out of the way, and then I need to take this slide cover plate off. To take the slide cover plate off, I need to reduce the spring pressure that is capturing it onto the slide. Now the slide is cut out to capture this, exactly the right size, but there's inside, there's a spring cup, it's called, excuse me, a spacer sleeve it's called, that goes around the striker, and it's pushing up on that. So I really can't get it off unless I take that spring pressure off there. But once you do that, it's very simple and very easy. Now, a lot of guys, you can actually get it off by just prying it off with a knife, and a lot of guys end up doing that and scratching that thing up, making it very nasty. But all you really need to do is come in here with a tool, like I said, it could be a ballpoint pen or a punch like I've got here, and push down on that spacer sleeve. And that's inside here. And there's a little piece of black plastic right there. Let's see if we can get in close real quick. And that is the spacer sleeve itself. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to push down on that, and I don't know if I can get much better light. There it is right there, yeah. So as I push down on that, now I'm going to go ahead and take my thumb and I'm going to thumb this cap off, just like that. Very simple, okay? And off it comes. Now you want to keep your thumb over top of that so you capture parts so they don't fly off, just like that. So there's the slide cover plate, and now we have access to this. And so what we'll need to do is pull back the striker somewhat. Go ahead and get that out of the way. And pull back our extractor, depressor plunger. And then, let's get this guy to pop out by itself here. That means I need to take a little bit of pressure because it's captured by this extractor itself. I'm just going to go take the barrel out too, just so you can get a little better view of this thing. And now it's gonna pop out by itself here once I go ahead and get this extractor out of the way. So here we go. Get the extractor out of here and it will come out. Come on now. Okay, there goes the extractor, and now here comes the safety plunger. And the safety plunger has a spring attached to it. And there it is right there. Okay, so that's the safety plunger, and the spring is kind of captured in there. And we're going to replace that part with our titanium safety plunger. Let me get that little spring out of here real quick. And then, of course, we're also going to replace the striker with the skeletonized striker. And the concept behind the skeletonized striker is that because it is lighter in weight, it moves faster and it locks up faster, which in turn improves accuracy because the gun is always in motion. So when you have the sights lined up and you squeeze the trigger, you want that to happen as soon as possible. All right, here's the little tiny spring that we're going to replace the factory part with. Okay, so it goes in the bottom of the safety plunger, just like so. And it's a lighter spring, so it's just going to rest in that hole just like that. All right, so what I'm going to do now is install this and put this guy right over top here. Now let's go ahead and do two things with one hand, really, if I can. First things first, let me get this guy out of my grasp there. I'm going to put this extractor back in. The extractor just goes in with the big leg like so. It really can't do anything wrong with that. And it's going to want to be captured by this safety plunger. So I'm going to put the safety plunger back in, being careful not to interfere with that screw, or that spring, should I say. And once I put the safety plunger in and the extractor in, they kind of capture each other into the slide. Just like that. Okay, so now a little trick we learned with this striker assembly. What you want to do is put the slide up like so, okay? and come in here with the striker and put it on top of the slide to be able to depress the spring to gain access to the spring cups. So make sure you don't lose these guys. It's a $3 part that will drive you crazy because gun doesn't work without them. Capture that spring. Off comes the spring. Now, if you don't have the skeletonized striker, you can use the factory striker, of course, and just one of the reduced power springs to help you get better accuracy and a better trigger pull. However, we're going to go ahead and install the skeletonized striker. So I'll take this guy out like so, and this is the spacer sleeve I was talking about that actually intersects with the back of the slide cover plate, just like that. So that's the connection. That's kind of how that rests. And again, if you look at the slide cover plate, you'll see there's a little cutout back there, and that cutout actually captures this thing so it doesn't go anywhere. It just fits in there perfectly. And that's why you can't remove this unless you pull that out of the way with that spring pressure we talked about with the punch. So that's kind of how the relationship. So I'll take this off the striker. I'm going to put the factory striker down, and I'm going to go ahead and take the skeletonized striker and put it back together with the spacer sleeve. Okay? So that's the animal we're working with. Now, I'm going to stand my slide back up and put this back into, just for holding purposes, kind of, you know, that's my third hand. And then I'm going to grab our reduced power spring. In fact, I think I'm going to put the, for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and put the 4-pound spring in here. Just, you know, to put something a little different in here. You can put the 6, you can put the 2 in. It's all about, you know, what you have in mind. So I've got the 4-pound spring, and they're labeled, of course, and they're in their bags. I always try to keep them in their bags so you know which one is which. I'm going to drop that spring right over top here, like so. Now this is probably the hardest thing we're going to do all day, and that's to put these spring cups back on. So you can kind of preload one of the spring cups in your hand. I'm going to take it off my mouth there just so I can get a little bit more access to it and so it doesn't wobble away. And I'm going to bring my hand up here, and I'm going to go ahead and depress this and gain access to the underside and the little neck of the striker itself. Okay, so there's kind of the concept. I've got one of the spring cups in my hand, got the other one at the ready, and I'm going to push this guy down, put the one guy on, capture it, come back, get the other one, and line them up. And if everything goes well, then you're lucky. It happens just that easy. It's not hard, it's not easy, it's just something that you kind of will get used to once you do it once or twice. Now, the only thing you want to do is to kind of inspect that thing and make sure that it looks like it's well seated, and yes, in fact, it is. So I'm happy with that. So there's my assembly. Really, the striker itself, the reduced power spring, and the spacer sleeve. Now, one thing about the striker that we've done that makes it a little bit better than the factory is that we've increased the tip just a little bit, by about 1 thou or so. Okay, just the size of that tip. Just so you don't get any light primer strikes, or if you have hard primers, this kind of makes sure that you get full ignition. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put this back together. And I'm going to slide the assembly into the slide upper, just like so. Okay, and it should go about halfway, or just, you know, it's going to see itself is going to be stuck up here as far as the spacer sleeve is going to have that spring pressure that we talked about. Okay, so then I'm going to get my slide cover plate and kind of pre-position it there. Now what I like to do here is take a thicker punch, because I'm going to push down the big spacer sleeve, and so I want to have a big piece of steel to push that plastic down, and then once I get it started, pull the big punch out, go back to my small punch and come up here and get this extractor depressor plunger, and voila, now the upper is back in order. Now while we're here, we always want to just test, does this work the way it's supposed to? So I'll go ahead and I'll pull the striker up, and it doesn't go forward unless I depress my safety plunger. Perfect. And notice it won't go forward unless that's depressed. And that's a very important safety feature of the Glock. That's why the Glock doesn't go bang unless you actually pull the trigger. This has to be depressed or the gun's not going to fire. That simple. Okay? Okay, so now the upper is done. So we've done, you know, kind of the hard part. That's probably the most physical manipulation you're going to do, especially with the striker spring and all that. Let's move on to the lower.